Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Radeon video, we're going to be discussing tech news which has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. Pretty much this is all from Team Red, because a smorgasbord of leaks and news has just appeared on the internets. We're going to be starting things out with an update concerning the custom Vega cards, then we're going to move over to AMD's actually somewhat surprising news, because they're going to be helping Tesla design a chip for processing artificial intelligence in self-driving cars. And then we're going to finish the video with the news that the next Ryzen along with the next RX Vega chips are going to be designed on the 12nm low power process. But first things first, we'll get into the smaller piece of news, and that is the custom versions of Vega. So I believe Amy actually covered the main bulk of this news a few days ago. Essentially, Hardware Lux and other websites have reached out to hardware vendors to say, hey, what's going on with the custom Vega cards? Basically, AMD are, at the moment, primarily focused upon the reference models. Therefore, they're not shipping out the raw GPUs, the actual chips, for the manufacturers to say, okay, well, we're going to be doing this and this with it, and, you know, putting out the, you know, the gaming X versions or the extreme amped versions or whatever, you know, the manufacturers are producing. However, a leak has popped up. This originates from videocards.com, and it's essentially a slightly tweaked version of the blower cooler on RX Vega. It's known as the Air Boost, and basically the I/O bracket has a few more holes at the rear, which in theory at least should provide better airflow. Now, of course, until I actually get this or other people get this and test it to see what difference in temperatures it actually makes, well, we can only make a guess. But hey, even if it cuts temperatures on average 1 or 2 degrees in a situation, that could be potentially beneficial, especially if the price difference isn't that much. You can see at the rear that there are, in fact, a couple of small differences with the rear venting, and yes, there are certainly a little bit of, slightly a little bit of extra space for air to escape. Next piece of news, AMD are going to be helping Tesla to produce self-driving cars. Now, this is actually surprising because A, it was kept very much under wraps. We'll go into how far the project is along in just a second. But B, Nvidia must be literally fuming. Because obviously, if you've been watching any Nvidia conference for the last several years, Jensen, actually forget even Jensen, Nvidia themselves have had this huge just excitement around, well, AI, self-driving cars and that type of thing. And obviously they've got a few exclusive contracts of their own, which is fine. But let's face it, currently in the tech world at least, Tesla is basically the darling of automotive. You know, Tesla is like, I don't know, it's almost like a movement. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, I'm just saying that they are really almost like, I'm probably going to get like some dislikes just for saying this, but they're almost like Apple in some respects. People just have this affinity towards them, and obviously that's doing wonders that AMD have got this contract. Anyway, enough blabbering. What actually is the story? Well, this originates from CNBC, and supposedly 50 Tesla engineers are reported to be working in this project. And who's working on this project? Jim Keller. That's right. Now, you might remember he actually did leave AMD for Better Ventures. Well, it appears that he was actually integral to this, because obviously he's got a, well, I'm gonna be very coy and say that he's got a fairly good understanding of the company's processes, since he helped to design some of them, including, of course, Zen. So apparently, this is not a pipe dream. This is not something that's going to happen in several years' time when we see the prototypes. No, 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 no. In actuality, Tesla are reported to be already having the samples in their possession, and these are semi-custom chips. We're not exactly sure of the specifications, so I couldn't tell you, well, hey, they've got like X number of CUs with X number of, Ryzen CPUs. I couldn't tell you that, but what we can say at least is they are semi-custom. And it would appear that this is a very good step towards Tesla's goal of delivering autonomous vehicles. Now, don't forget that their pledge is to do this by like 2019. It's possible that they will be using Navi. The reason I say it's possible is because supposedly and you know whether this is true or not, is that Navi is going to be much more like Volta. With Volta, of course, you've got hardware which specifically increases the speed of deep learning. Those are the Tensor cores. Supposedly, Navi features very much the same technology inside of it. Obviously, roadmaps can change and leaks can change, but it does paint a pretty good picture that this is actually true, because obviously, if Tesla are using this, it just makes sense that they feel confident in the product to actually be able to achieve this. It's possibly also a good sign in terms of power consumption and overall size and heat as well, because obviously if it requires, you know, a thermal reactor to be able to power it, that's not much use for an electric vehicle, never mind one that also needs to calculate our artificial intelligence calculations, which are crucial for not doing that thing that's not very good for human life, known as crashing. So, there was a slide deck that was released just a while back, actually, by AMD. If memory serves, it was either earlier this year or late last year. Basically, it was a graphics architecture roadmap and an x86 core roadmap. And basically, we saw that Vega, of course, was going to be on 14nm and also 14nm+, which kind of told us that the next generation Vega, or the tweaked Vega, I guess you could say, was going to be built on a slightly refined process, and we might see perhaps higher clock speeds, lower power consumption. Navi would be built on 7nm, and then next generation, which of course is not named at the moment, is going to be built on 7nm+. Zen is going to have a couple of different variants. It's going to have 14nm and 14nm+, and then Zen 2 is going to be built on 14nm and 14nm+, and then Zen 2 is going to be built on 7nm. However, a new slide has leaked out, and this one basically has a year plan from 2017 to 2019. Essentially, we're going to be looking at a 12LP, 12nm FinFET, and it's reported to offer a 15% improvement in circuit density and 10% improvement to performance. That's in comparison to 16nm. Risk productions are happening in the first half of 2018, and apparently will have highly compelling options for customers. 12LP builds on the GF14 LPP platform in high production since 2016. Pushed rules and new constructs, enable logic area shrinking while minimizing design rework, and 12LP also includes a new market focused for automotive and RF analog applications. I wonder what that could be for. Any guesses? Yeah, those stories tie in rather nicely, don't they, my friends? So essentially what we're looking at here is AMD are slightly ahead of what their projections were. At least in terms of 14nm+, it's now being shifted to 12nm. This means, in theory, the so-called Zen Plus architecture might now be the driving force behind Ryzen 2000. It looks like that's going to launch in the second half of 2018. This means it's going to be an absolute slapfest between AMD and Intel. Now, I don't want to bring up like which company is going to offer the best product. Really, to be honest, if Intel can release an 8-core CPU based upon either Coffee Lake or Ice Lake or, you know, the Grandma's secret recipe, whatever it is, it's going to be very interesting. It's of course going to come down to price. It's going to come down to compatibility, as in like if these processors from AMD can work on AM4, then obviously the CPUs are going to sell well, but motherboard vendors might be a bit disinclined. Of course, you've got PCIe 4 coming out then, so how many PCIe lanes they've got, what shifts and changes you're going to have there. Also, the final one, and this one's pretty obvious, the overall performance. That's, of course, the amount of cache, what changes they've got architecturally. Are we going to be seeing improvements to IPC? Are we going to be seeing improvements to clock speed? One can argue that if, and I stress the word if, AMD can tweak the clock speeds to the 4.5 gig-ish mark, so let's say 4.4 to 4.6, which would be absolutely stellar, that would be stunning, maintain 8 cores or above, and in addition to that, improve IPC by 5 to 15%, let's say a median of 10. I wouldn't say they're going to beat Intel outright, because honestly, it's going to depend on Coffee Lake. We can get an idea of Coffee Lake where their future lies. But I would say that it's going to put Intel in a very much a retaliate situation. As for AMD's GPU side of things, well, that's a bit trickier. It looks like this is essentially Vega 2.0 or Vega 20 or whatever you want to call it, which, from what I'm hearing, is going to just be essentially a tweaked version of Vega. There's going to be some improvements in the actual design. Obviously, we should, in theory at least, see higher clock speeds thanks to lower heat production, not higher heat production. That would be very, very bad. And on top of that, perhaps lower power consumption, maybe even a few more compute units being shoved into the same space, but obviously that's not confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. And from what I'm also hearing, this GPU is going to be very much designed for HPC first, in other words, high performance computing, which I wouldn't say that Vega is anemic in, but they could certainly use a little bit of help. It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years how all of this plays out. And there's one thing for certain. I'm very grateful for AMD for actually pushing this, because it basically means competition. And yes, I know it might sound a bit of a broken record, but I don't care if you're an Intel fan right now, or whether you're someone who's got like two GTX 1080s and SLI with a G-Sync monitor and you play at 1440p and your desktop is photo is literally, you know, Jensen himself in his patented leather jacket holding up, you know, the GTX 1080 Pascal. In reality, without AMD and without other competitors pushing this stuff, you'd see some stagnation, and honestly that's one of the reasons that the GTX 1080 possibly wasn't as fast as maybe what it could have been. I do feel that they maybe could have enabled a few more SMs in the higher end market, and obviously if Vega had released sooner, which it didn't, so that's just, you know, how it is, but if Vega had released a lot sooner, perhaps we would have seen a 1080 on steroids. Perhaps the 1080 would have been the same as the Ti/Ti, and perhaps the, you know, we'd have seen an even faster version. Who knows? It's very difficult to say, and of course that's just he said, she said. If there's one area, however, I'm very grateful for, perhaps even more than the GPU side, it's the CPU side, because let's face it, 4 cores, 8 threads, how exciting was that? Let's be honest, like, when I was reporting it, I was like, yeah, Skylake, 4 cores, 8 threads, Spanx for that at Intel, Kaby Lake, 4 cores, 8 threads, same cache, pretty much identical architecture. Oh look, it's got slightly higher clock speeds. Now I don't mean that in a negative way and me hating on Intel, but you know, it's not exactly invigorating the processor landscape, was it? Anyway, with all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon, take care, bye for now.